Good morning, friends. It's really joy and honor on my part to be with you in the coming days. And I would like to thank my very dear friend, Kathy Matsui, and the board for making it possible for me to be with you. It's really an honor to even given the privilege of giving you the keynote this morning. So, my topic is educating and working for peace and what I have learned. As you can see, I'm not very young anymore. So I have a few decades of experience. I know that you are also peace workers, and I am sure that for some, there is really nothing new that I will be saying. But for others, and I see many young faces still in our group, maybe there is a thing or two that they might learn from my experiences. I've actually prepared a paper which I have given to IALRW earlier, but it's a bit long, and what I will be presenting to you now is really just a summary. And I started with the idea of my having many identities, as all of us have many identities: grandmothers, mothers, wives, maybe teachers, our nationalities. Like in my case, I'm Filipino, that's part of my identity. But I have always thought that my primary identity is that I am a human being. And that is, before I was anything else, that's what I am. I'm a member of the human family. This realization inspires me to feel compassion and care for all humans, and to believe that all humans are connected because we have all come from the same sacred source or creator. Earlier in the prayer of Professor Kamar, she mentioned that we are all interconnected, and I so believe in that. In fact, not only humans, but even with the non-human world. I was raised a Catholic and had the good fortune of being educated by an American missionary congregation called the Maryknoll Sisters. I say it was my good fortune because these sisters were, I thought, very open, progressive, constructive. And I would really say that that kind of an education had helped me very much to be what I am today. I was a junior high school student when the Second Vatican Council was convened, and among other important outcomes, two stand out for me. And this would be the ethic of human solidarity that was stressed in the council, and also the importance of interreligious dialogue. I still recall that as a high school student, I had the thought that the role of the Christian was to convert others to become Christian. But of course, as I was being educated by the Maryknoll Sisters, and I saw in their example, that was not our obligation, that we should convert others. In fact, they were telling us, the sisters told us, that when they go to other places, they go there not to convert, but to just accompany people they are with, remaining as Christians and giving their Christian presence, but not to actively convert anyone to Catholicism. And that really made an impact on me. It made me realize that really bridges could be built among believers of various religions without the need to change each other. And then I also, as I grew in age, I also realized that various faiths share the same basic teachings, such as love the other as you love yourself, have compassion, be fair in our relationships, and the golden rule, do to others what you want done to you. I realized that this idea was common in practically all the major world religions. It wasn't a golden rule for Christians alone, which I thought it was, okay, when I was much younger. But now I realize it's the golden rule of all major world religions. A little bit about where I am from. So a short backgrounder on the Philippines. We are here, it's a group of islands here, just south of Japan, and we're in the southeast of China. Because we're facing the Pacific Ocean, we are often visited by typhoons. And so our group's concern about climate change is also something very important to us Filipinos. Some facts about the Philippines. We are an archipelago of over 7,000 islands. We have a population of 100 million. We have more than 100 languages and dialects spoken. We're 81% Catholic, 11% Protestant, 5% Muslim, and the others are Buddhist. So we are very different from the other Asian countries in this sense. For example, in most of Southeast Asia, the people are Buddhist. But it's really because of our history. We were colonized by Spain, and this is where the Catholicism has come from. And then by the United States, and then by Japan during the Second World War. But maybe at this point, let me just say that before Spain arrived in the country, we already had Islamic sultanates in the south of the country. And later on, I will explain why we have this armed conflict with the Moro liberation fronts. In the 1970s until February 1986, we were under a dictatorship. I don't know if the names Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos ring a bell. They were the dictators of this time, until we had a non-violent people power revolt in February 1986. But during this time that we were under a dictatorship, we saw the rise of two major armed groups. And those two major armed groups were the Communist Party of the Philippines, New People's Army, NDF. NDF stands for National Democratic Front, and the Moro National Liberation Front. So that was really a difficult time for us because there were many clashes between government forces and these armed groups. After the nonviolent people power revolt, we had the assumption our first woman president, Corazon Aquino, and it was she who started the peace negotiations with the non-state armed groups. Although she didn't see any peace agreement during her term, the next administration saw the inking of an agreement or the completion of one agreement. And this was a peace agreement between the government and the Moro National Liberation Front. However, there was a splinter group to the MNLF, and this was the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. And this was for 17 years a problem in the country. Hundreds of thousands of government forces and also fighters from the Moro Islamic Liberation Front have died. However, the good news is that just last March 2014, we had a peace agreement between the government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. The acronym is MILF. However, there are continuing challenges to peace, because we all know that peace is not just the absence of armed conflict or war. And those other challenges are, first, the stalled peace talks with the Communist Party of the Philippines. It is right now not going anywhere. And then we have prejudices between Christians and Muslims, and also between dominant ethnic groups and indigenous groups that still is continuing as a problem. Economic disparities and what we call structural violence. So the government says 1 out of 3 Filipinos is poor, but non-government sources, and I think we can believe their data more, would say that the truth is 2 out of 5 Filipinos are poor. And in other words, we're below the poverty line, 2 out of 5. And this means people who are living on $1 or $2 a day. Of course, we also have ecological problems due to unscrupulous logging and mining and government corruption or poor governance. So, what could be our response to all these challenges to peace? And as a peace educator, of course, I would always say peace education is an important response, is an important pathway. But maybe before I say more about that, I'll just give a bit of personal history. How and when did my personal history interact with these challenges? And it started really in 1979. I had been a teacher for 10 years. And just trying to teach like any other teacher, okay? Know the subject matter, be nice and kind to your students. These were all the things that I thought were important for me to do. Until I attended a seminar workshop in 1979. And the training was on the values of nonviolence, economic equity, social justice, and ecological balance. And that participation was a turning point in my life. Why do I say that it was a turning point? Because it was then that I realized that there was more that I could do than just, knowing my subject matter and being a nice teacher to my students, that I could have a broader vision, that I could contribute more, that I could be what I now call really be a peace educator. And here I mean peace in a holistic sense. As I've said, not just the absence of direct violence or physical violence, but also thinking of peace as the presence of conditions of well-being. Well-being for humans and also well-being for our planet Earth, which is our home, our common home. So I had this new vision of education, which is holistic, human value-centered, and future-oriented. My conscious journey as a peace educator and advocate, and peace advocate. And this is why, when I give training for other teachers, I always tell them we should never underestimate any training, any workshop, any conference such as this one, because it might be a moment of awakening, the way it was a moment of awakening for me in 1979. So when I say peace education, what do I mean? It's education that seeks to transform mindsets, attitudes, and values, as well as behaviors that either created or exacerbated violent conflicts. It also seeks awareness of the roots of violent conflict. We find that the roots are really within us. It's in our minds, it's in our hearts. When we embrace the spirit and principle of domination and also of acquisitiveness, I readily see the root there. And it is something that we have to be aware of. Because when we speak of change, And we say that peace education is really transformative education. It's education that seeks changes in our minds, in our hearts, in our actions. We cannot just think of changing our mindsets, our attitudes and values, but we have to also see how these mindsets, attitudes and values have actually influenced the systems that are around us, particularly systems of domination. So what have I learned? The first is start with an important question. What is my preferred future, my vision? And this happened to me after that workshop. I had to look into myself and ask myself this question. I felt then, and I still feel now, that my preferred future or my vision is to help establish a society that respects human dignity and a society that rejects all forms of violence. Also, that I want to seek peace by peaceful means. I say this because there are groups in my country who say we are for peace, but they are open to using other means that we might not consider peaceful to reach that end. And so in my own peace education, I always emphasize this, that it has to be peace by peaceful means. It is like it is like what Gandhi has told us about having morality in politics, that if our end is good, our means must also be good. I think that to achieve peace, we have to use the ways of dialogue, negotiation, diplomacy, other ways, but not through armed struggle. And then, of course, because I was a teacher, I thought that I could begin there. I could promote peace education, be an effective peace. Being an effective peace educator and advocate means that we gather and analyze information, raise awareness and understanding, and also engage in personal and social action. My idea here is that some people call themselves peace activists, but I think it is best if, as peace advocates, if we can be three things rolled in one. For me, it works better, okay? That you can be a researcher, so you can gather the right information. You can be an educator by raising awareness and understanding, and you act. Then you become an activist. But it is good that we have all of these three branches of peace work working together or all together in our peace work. Second point is begin with self and begin with small, steady steps. I started by re-examining my own beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors. One of the first things that I wanted to do something about was the prevalence of prejudices between Muslims and Christians. But before I tried to do this, I had to examine myself. What were my own prejudices? And I had to resolve to change. I infused my own teaching with the new ideas I was learning. I was a history teacher. So these were some of the early ideas that I tried testing with my students. War is not in our human nature, because when you poll a class, you can really see so many of our young people thinking that war is inevitable. It cannot be avoided. It is in us. It is in our human nature. And this was one of the first challenges I had to meet. I had to convince my students, no, it is not in our human nature. Maybe we're thinking of it this way because of the way our history is even taught to us. You know, we reckon important events by battles and wars. But is it something that is really innate in us? And I think not. It is something that we have learned from our environment, from our history, from our culture. This is something that UNESCO UNESCO's civil statement on violence have also affirmed. Many of my students would say it's impossible not to have war in the future. And I only remind them this fact, that once upon a time, everyone thought slavery was all right. It was an acceptable social institution, and slavery had to go as an institution. And so I tell my students, think of war, think of the institution of war as something like slavery. Now people think of it as a legitimate means of resolving a conflict or a dispute. But if more of us would think of it as an illegitimate way of resolving conflicts, it may go the way slavery went, that enough of us, a critical mass of us, will delegitimize it in the eyes of everyone. Maybe we will not see it in our lifetime, but let's just plant that seed of an idea. It might come in the next century, but we just have to start planting the seeds today. You know, and I could really see the eyes of my students lighting up. By the way, I teach in the higher education level. You know, it's like, wow, we never thought of it that way. But, you know, I tell them it can change. It just takes enough of us believing in an idea. And then also, of course, the idea that there are alternatives to violent ways, and that violence prevention is better than cure. So we do everything to prevent a violent conflict, because once the violent conflict is there, it is much harder to remedy the problem. It's an idea that we borrow from the medical sciences. Prevention is better than cure. Okay, and then part of beginning with the self is trying to be an edu-learner. This is a new word now for peace educators. So we educate, but we also learn at the same time. In other words, in the classroom or in any education setting, the teacher or facilitator, as well as the learner in that setting, are both contributors to the learning process. It is not just the teacher who is doing the educating, but that both learner and the facilitator or educator are contributing together into the learning process. Be the change that you want to see in the world, and that's why we have to begin with self. That's a quote from Gandhi, from the mass communications world. This quote, the medium is the message. So part of my work is educating educators. So I go to colleges of education, I do workshops for them, or we organize workshops in our college and they come to our college to take peace education training. And I really emphasize this. This is so important, that we reflect in our lives the values that we are teaching, because that's how we gain credibility with the young people. So we cannot teach them fairness if they cannot see fairness in us and all other things. So we are the message. The educator is the message. How we are is the message. In my case, I had to find my kindred spirits within my own school and try to make it the core of a widening circle of peace advocates. So if we are working for an organization or for a school, I think it's one of the first things we have to do, because around us there are like-minded people who would like to do the same and who would like to work with us. I know in Seisen University, I'm sorry, I know a little bit about Seisen because of Kathy. I know that she has started something there. Really, not only a program like Global Citizenship Studies, but many of our colleagues have bought in to the idea of educating for peace and global citizenship. It's, you know, building the community within our own organizations, because we cannot do things alone. And I have found that myself. I needed a group to be with me in my own school and start with my own school, because how could I even share my knowledge with others if I cannot say that I've tried to do it in my school and this is how we did it. So it is like really promoting something that you have experienced, and then that adds to the credibility of what you are promoting, if you can say that you have tried it and it has worked. And in my case, they help us as volunteers, as many of you are volunteers here in this conference. Like, we celebrate special days, International Day of Peace. For example, we also have the so-called Mindanao Week of Peace. And we have a project. Our school has a project called Twinning Project between Muslim and Christian youth. They help in that project. I'll say a bit more about that in a while. And then, of course, we also have disarmament activities. We lobby for gun control. We lobby for anti-discrimination. And also, now, since 2 years ago, we are the secretariat for the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. We are the focal point in the country for that advocacy. Learning is taking a holistic approach. Also, the realization that there is a powerful connection among the head, the heart, and the will. So in our school, we have tried putting in place what we call a whole school approach. We think it's a more effective way of creating change and it should be our goal, more effective way of creating change, because we are not just limiting ourselves to the teacher, to the classroom, but also touching other areas of the school community. Now, for us who are not working in schools, I think the principle will still be useful. The idea is, wherever we are, whatever is our context, that we try to look at the different aspects of our community or organization and try to infuse our desired values, or find ways of infusing desired values in those various aspects of our organization. But because I work in a school mainly, allow me to just focus on the whole school approach. So it gives attention to infusing desired values into the various aspects of the school, including curriculum, teaching learning process, engagement with parents and the larger society. And in a little while, I'll show you a diagram that we're using to show that whole school approach. It is a working together of the whole school community, or of all the stakeholders, toward common values and action. And you will see that I used a graphic that I found in the internet about the whole school approach. And you can see these are human figures that are putting together puzzle pieces, because that's the idea in the whole school approach. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. Each of us is a stakeholder, is a puzzle piece. And we cannot complete the puzzle if one puzzle piece is missing. So this is the diagram that I was telling you about. This is what we're using in my college. So at the center is our vision mission. We're explicit about our commitment to working for peace, justice, and also ecological integrity. And around it are small circles. So these are the various aspects that we try to work on. But I want to tell you that we're not yet there. We are, progressing to the goal, but it's still a goal that we have not completely achieved. So curriculum, content, participatory and dialogical teaching learning methods would be another aspect. Student programs would be another one. So we have conflict resolution training and peer mediation training for our faculty and students. And then, of course, development of peace-related materials. So if you want to learn more about peace education, if you can access our work in the internet. There's a material that we have put as a resource in the Global Campaign for Peace Education website. But if you just Google peace education, a pathway to a culture of peace, peace education, a pathway to a culture of peace, and put my name, then an online resource will come out and you can use it, because this online resource has a conceptual part but also has ideas for teaching learning ideas. And then enrichment programs for staff, peace-oriented policies, and very quickly, I really would just like to say that one policy that we're trying to influence is the student discipline policy. My own college has started with what we call a restorative discipline policy, which veers away from punishment like suspensions. But I want to tell you, it was a hard struggle because so many of the teachers and even parents and administrators are thinking the old way. To stop someone from misbehaving, punish. But I have raised that question in my own school and also in other discussions in other institutions. What does suspension really do? You know, if you really analyze it. And so we try to convince our administration there's a better way to discipline, a kind of discipline that is not punitive, but is attending to the needs of the person who has misbehaved. So our attention is not only on the offended, but also on the offender. How can we reform the offender so that he or she could be a good member of the community once again? Then participative structures and caring relationships, and then peace action and activities of social concern. I included this here because, or in our diagram, because I believe in what Mother Teresa has said, that any act of love is an act for peace. In other words, it's not just going in the streets, although sometimes you may have to do that, do public action. It's not just rallying in the streets for a peace cause. But any act of love, as Mother Teresa says, is an act for peace. This is just to say that this is the teaching learning process that we encourage facilitators and educators to use. Again, it's what we consider a holistic teaching learning process where we attend to the mind, the heart, that's the affective phase, and then encourage action. We say that peace education is not complete if there's no result in behavioral change or in action, whether it's personal action or social action. So in the interest of time, I cannot say more, but that's the general idea, that we touch the mind, we touch the heart, develop feelings of empathy and concern, and also encourage action on a personal level and also at the social level. The fifth is take a comprehensive approach to peace building, use a combination of approaches toward the same direction. So promote peace education to build a peace constituency, and connect with as many actors as possible, horizontally, meaning with other civil society organizations, and vertically with government agencies mainly. I include this because the usual perception of some activists is that government is an adversary. But in our situation, we have found that in government, even in the military, and even in the police, we have kindred spirits there. We have to look for them. We have to identify them, work with them, cooperate with them towards the same goal. And we have found such kindred spirits in those agencies. And then help build structures too, aside from education, help build structures and policy framework to catalyze the changes that need to happen. So, for example, building organizational networks, such as it has been mentioned when I was introduced. I initiated a peace education network because I believe that, you know, for us to grow and for us to be able to really influence more, we needed a network of people who want to do peace education. And so now we have a thriving peace education network. Executive Order 570, this is an executive order from the past president, the immediate past president of our country. It says that peace education should be institutionalized or mainstreamed in basic education and in the colleges of education. My sadness here is that it is an executive order, but I realize it is executive order number 570. So you can just imagine, before this and after this, there have been executive orders. And the president can really sign so many executive orders, but if we don't have the people who will implement the executive order, it will be a piece of paper. Period. And that is what I have found with this. At least I was happy there was a policy framework, and sometimes you were able to use it and say, according to executive order, that we should do this, you know. But really, it will not move. And that's why I say here, note implementation of policy, because that's a policy, it's an executive order. But the implementation is key. And the implementation will depend on who will be the implementers and what is the value system of the implementer. So this is where civil society organizations like us can move in. Okay, we have the policy framework, but no one is really trying to implement, and we try to do what we can. Build people-to-people relationships to accompany the formal peace process. I already told you about the March 2014 peace agreement between the government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. But see, that is just, it's important. The agreement is important. It's the beginning. But it is not the end of the peace process. In fact, the implementation of that agreement is even more important. It can collapse, it can break down if their implementation is not in accordance to what was agreed upon. And this is our role as CSOs in the Philippines now, to make sure that we accompany the process. 2 weeks ago, there was a danger of the agreement being in trouble because the Moro Islamic Liberation Front they were saying a law needs to be passed, and we all know that. It's called the Bangsamoro Basic Law. A law has to be passed by Congress for the agreement to really be implemented. But when the draft of the law was shown to the MILF, they rejected it. And that's as late as 2 weeks ago. They rejected it because they said, this is not what we agreed. What is in the law, in the draft law, is not what we agreed. And so all of us were nervous. What will happen now? But we appealed to both government and MILF. Please go back to the draft, see what can be done so that it can be more faithful to the peace agreement, and so that there is no return to armed conflict. We don't want. I am from Luzon. You might say, you know, what is my concern? Yes, we are concerned because what afflicts a part of our country affects the whole country. And we really would like it to succeed. And fortunately, 2 weeks later, after a 10-day workshop of all those involved, they were able to come up with a draft law that is acceptable to both government and the MILF. And now it's on its way. The build people-to-people relationships is what I mentioned earlier, like efforts like twinning projects between Muslim and Christian youth. You can see there are photos here. We bring together Christian and Muslim youth to break down the barriers of prejudice. And then collaborate with regional and international peace actors to strengthen local efforts. These are some of the regional and international peace work that we're doing in the other photos. You can see it in the other photos. Next is to create and nourish hope in others and in ourselves. Peace work is a long-term process, and we need both patience and perseverance. Also, hope is a key concept in most major world religions. Even poets have spoken about hope, and I just mentioned one, Rubem Alves, who's a Brazilian, and he said, I paraphrase, he said, hope is like planting trees and knowing that we might not be able to eat their fruits. It is the conviction that we are doing the right thing, and so we do it. That we may not see the outcome in our lifetime does not discourage us. And I add words from Martin Luther King Jr. He said, the believer in nonviolence has deep faith in the future, for he knows that in his struggle for justice, he has cosmic companionship, some creative force that works for universal wholeness. And finally, raising our voices for change. As people of faith, we have a long and rich tradition of faith-based resistance to violence and faith-based adherence to love, compassion, justice, and reconciliation. So we need to educate our families, organizations, and communities about everyone's responsibility to work for positive social change. We have to serve as catalysts to serve the cause of other women and raise our voices through statements and public actions. Whatever is the particular context that is present in our own communities, one thing is clear. We can respond to the challenge better by being organized and by working together to resolve it. Working for peace and social change is a long and arduous road, and I want to leave you with a quote from Aung San Suu Kyi that can help us keep going. She said, "A perfect peace may not be possible because it is not of our world, but still we should journey to it." Thank you.